We all love to hate a bad guy, especially when that bad guy pops up in video games as a boss that we have to fight, but sometimes games turn the tables on us and we end up empathizing with those bosses, or we at least end up feeling bad for them, either because of their tragic pasts or just their sheer bad luck. In this feature, we'll be taking a look at 15 such bosses. William Birkin, Resident Evil 2. William Birkin is no saint, and throughout the Resident Evil franchise, he's been responsible for plenty of bad stuff, the most prominent of which was the outbreak in Raccoon City, which led to the entire city being nuked. But the fate that he suffered was a horrible one nonetheless. After Birkin infected himself with the G-Virus, he gradually became a prisoner in his own body, and in his tortured state, he was eventually forced to watch from the sidelines as the virus took over his body and mind, and did one horrible thing after another. The Bakers, Resident Evil 7. Welcome to the family, son, and what a family it is. The Bakers proved to be a compelling group of antagonists in Resident Evil 7, but their backstories revealed that they're victims of circumstance as well. Though Joe's sociopathic behavior is hard to justify, the other members of the family were turned into crazy killers after being infected, while prior to that, they'd been nothing of the sort. Steve Burnside, Resident Evil Code Veronica. Steve is a character that a lot of Resident Evil fans are not very fond of, but it can't be denied that the poor guy was really put through the ringer. Before he was infected and forced to fight against Claire, he had been captured alongside his father by Umbrella and imprisoned in Rockford Island, while his mother was also killed by the shady organization. BB Unit, Metal Gear Solid 4. The Metal Gear Solid series always had a knack for presenting its main bosses as more than just set-piece encounters. They were also actual characters with proper backstories that were, more often than not, really tragic. The BB Unit in MGS4 exemplifies that perfectly, with each of these twisted monsters having been soldiers in the past who now suffer from extreme post-traumatic stress disorder. Sniper Wolf, Metal Gear Solid. Speaking of tragic bosses in a Metal Gear game, the sequence in the first MGS with Sniper Wolf was perhaps the most heart-wrenching of them all. After an intense and prolonged fight with her, Snake is finally able to take her out. Players are told about her traumatic past and everything that she had to go through from a very young age. That, along with Hal's broken heart when she ends up dying, makes Sniper Wolf one of the most memorable and tragic antagonists that we've ever seen in a game. Mr. Freeze, Batman, Arkham City. Mr. Freeze has always been one of Batman's most tragic foes, and in Arkham City, the aspect of this character was shown quite effectively. His motivations in the game are far from villainous, and the man remains a victim of terrible events in his past as he's always been. The fact that he reluctantly agrees to help Batman after the Caped Crusader defeats him in combat just goes to show that he's far, far from the worst bad guy running around in Arkham City. Asgore, Undertale. Depending on how you play Undertale, Asgore can be one of the very last boss fights in the game, but it's always clear that he's not really a bad guy. Sure, his plans involve killing people, but he's not really evil, and he's not doing what he's doing with malice in his heart. No, he just wants to free the monsters he rules and let them escape the confines of the underground. Wheatley, Portal 2. Wheatley serves as almost a second protagonist for the first half of Portal 2, and it's hard not to find him endearing. And even though he does sort of lose it in the second half, you can't deny that he's more a victim of circumstances than anything else. Sure, he's driven mad with power, and sure, he becomes even more of a threat than GLaDOS, which is saying something. But can we ever really truly hate the machine that turned GLaDOS into a potato? Yeah, I don't think so. Ganondorf, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. Ganon has been the ultimate big bad in Zelda for as long as the series has existed, but it's hard to think of a game in the franchise that portrayed him as well as The Wind Waker did. Sure, his actions led to widespread destruction, but his motivations weren't really driven out of malice. All Ganondorf wanted was to lead the Gerudo, his people, out of the harsh desert where they'd been forced to live in harsh conditions for years and years. Ganondorf's quest to rule Hyrule may have led to doing some devastating stuff, but he only wanted to do it so that he could give his people a better life. 210, Nier Automata. Infected by the logic virus, 210 turns into a foe for us as players, but the game does a very good job of humanizing her, ironically enough, prior to that. All 210 really wants, deep down inside, is to be part of her family, and it becomes clearer and clearer that the cold exterior she's putting up as a front is just her own self-defense mechanism to keep people at a distance. Even as she fights 9S, she struggles against herself, mentioning again that all she wanted was a family of her own. Angeal, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. Angeal is a formidable foe for Zack and at the crux of much that goes wrong in Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII, but in spite of that, it's hard to really classify him as a villain. He's a true mentor for Zack and is the man who passes down the Buster Sword to him, while his teachings to his student are integral to his character arc as well. Learning about his past and the circumstances of his birth clearly has a destructive impact on him, leading him to resent his own existence and imposing exile upon himself. Iris, Mega Man X4. Iris is one of our closest allies for much of Mega Man X4, so even mentioning her in a list such as this one is a bit heartbreaking. Her love and loyalty for Zero is clear for everyone to see, but the grief and anger at losing her brother consume her. The fact that her eventual demise comes from Zero himself is that much more heart-wrenching. Zeke, Infamous 2. Granted, depending on the choices that you make while playing Infamous 2, Zeke might not even be a boss for you, much less one with an unfortunate story. But if you choose to end Infamous 2 as the evil version of Cole, things go very wrong for him. Not only does Zeke lose a close friend in Cole, but he also sees his friend unravel and turn into an absolute monster, before finally being killed by him as well. Saren, Mass Effect. It's easy to hate Saren on your first playthrough of Mass Effect, but the Turian, like so many others in the series, is just a victim of much greater forces. Indoctrinated by Sovereign, Saren is driven to do a lot of things that he probably would not have done if he'd been in his senses, and the fact that one of the endings for the game sees Shepard successfully talking him down and him going on to take his own life goes to show that the poor guy was actually not that much of a villain himself. Bloodwing, Borderlands 2. Of all the characters to have suffered a terrible fate because of the exploits of the roguish handsome Jack, Bloodwing the Dragon was perhaps the most unfortunate. Mutated by Jack to exponentially grow in size and be imbued with elemental powers, Bloodwing is essentially an unwitting and unwilling participant in the fight against the Vault Hunters. The fact that she goes on to be killed by Jack exploding the collar around her neck makes her fate that much darker. And that wraps it up. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing to our channel. We upload new videos daily. Also, don't forget to switch on the bell notification icon, that way you don't miss out on any of our videos.